An update on Venezuela and its power outages. Amplification of social media posts as a form of mass persuasion. We've got to look at how control of the internet has replaced control of the radio station as a move in civil war and coup or counter-coup planning. Asian game makers get backdoored out of China. Decryptors are out for Big Bob Ross ransomware. Senator Warren versus Facebook and Facebook versus itself. And Sir Tim Berners-Lee on the web's 30th birthday. Now a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Observe It. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys. Your employees, contractors, and privileged users. In fact, a whopping 60% of online attacks today are carried out by insiders. Can you afford to ignore this real and growing threat? With Observe It, you don't have to. See, most security tools only analyze computer, network, or system data. But to stop insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observe It combats insider threats by enabling your security team to detect risky activity, investigate in minutes, effectively respond, and stop data loss. Want to see it in action for yourself? Try Observe It for free. No installation required. Go to observeit.com/cyberwire. That's observeit.com/cyberwire. And we thank Observe It for sponsoring our show. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Tuesday, March 12, 2019. If you're interested in concise expositions of the Chavista line on Venezuela's ongoing power crisis, Citizen Truth is retailing it like it's 1919, and Iran's Tasnim agency like it's 1979. It was criminal Yankee cyber attacks and sabotage by traitorous, disloyal Venezuelans that done it, says nominal but arguably deposed President Maduro. The New York Times has a reflective and comprehensive account of the outages, which it sadly concludes are likely to continue for the foreseeable future with all the suffering they produce. The Timesman on the scene who co-wrote the article, Anatoly Kormanayev, is even clearer in his personal Twitter feed on how the blackouts probably came about. Neglect, layoffs, failure to clear brush from around transmission lines and substations, with brush fires knocking out power, load demand exceeding capacity, and so on. It certainly looks like the result of infrastructure collapse, with no need to reach for sabotage or cyber attack as explanations. 21 of Venezuela's 23 states have been affected by the blackouts. There are two bits of overt and undeniable Yankee intervention in the crisis. The U.S. State Department has pulled its last remaining diplomats from Caracas, and the U.S. Treasury Department has sanctioned a Russian bank for evading sanctions against the Chavista regime. Researchers at security firm F-Secure have been looking at Brexit posts in social media and believe they've found that at least one side of the House, the Brexit side, has had its views amplified by tweets from unspecified international actors generally engaged in boosting causes and moods F-Secure characterizes as right, including such populist unrest as that of France's Gilets jaunes. Effective control over the internet seems to have become the equivalent of what shaky regimes and their coup-plotting opponents of the mid-20th century always sought in the opening days of a crisis: control of the radio station. Online intelligence firm Recorded Future this morning released a study of how such control has played out in troubled places over the last half-decade or so. Their research follows up an earlier report outlining the digital conflict that has attended Yemen's civil war. 2 more NetSweeper devices have now been set up in Yemen. These devices are usually used for web content filtering, but they can be used for censorship if they're implemented with a consumer-facing internet service provider. When Houthi rebels took over Yemen's capital in 2014, the country's major internet provider fell under their control. The researchers had previously identified one NetSweeper device on the Houthi-controlled network. Beyond Yemen, Recorded Future also takes a look at internet manipulation in Venezuela, Bangladesh, Sudan, and India. Last month, Kaspersky Lab observed DNS manipulation in Venezuela that resulted in Venezuelan supporters of Juan Guaido entering their personal information on a malicious spoofed website. In January, Bangladesh throttled all mobile data services in the country in order to limit communication before its national election. Recorded Future sees this as an attempt to control the external narrative of the country's internal affairs, particularly by inhibiting talk of human rights abuses. This past December, Sudan cut off access to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp as a rumor control move during a period of nationwide protests. India, with a well-developed and relatively sophisticated level of connectivity, saw a large number of internet disruptions. Most of the government-induced shutdowns came in response to reported terrorist or militant activity, but the researchers say the scope and regularity of the incidents inevitably raised troubling questions about control of information. The Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute is hosting their 5th annual cybersecurity conference for executives that takes place March 13th in Baltimore. One of the featured speakers is Dr. Phyllis Schneck. She's managing director of the Global Cyber Solutions practice at Promontory Financial Group, an IBM company. She joins us with a preview of the presentation she'll be giving at the conference on the role of regulation in cyber.
In cybersecurity, you're dealing a lot with the application of technology to enable our business and here our banking. But if you regulate that technology too much, you could end up preventing some of the very innovation that makes the technology. So day to day at Promontory, my team focuses with our clients at banks and other areas such as biotechnology and aviation. And we say, what is your risk? It's not about how much technology you buy. It's about what is the risk your board of directors has decided that your company is willing to take. They call it the risk appetite. How do you manage that risk? What are the things that make you, for example, a target or put you in danger? And what are the things you need to do, technology, governance, people-wise, to put in place as a process to ensure that it's not if, unfortunately, but when someone tries to intrude, steal, or damage your systems electronically, how you're able to bounce right back. And this is a very important part of the safety and soundness of any infrastructure. It's really looking at your board of directors and your company and your brand and saying, how much risk am I willing to take from all the electronics that enable my world? And how do I protect it? And then the big question is, how much of that protection should be required? And how much is up to you? And a lot of it comes to the difference between compliance and security. Compliance is not security. Regulatory compliance says you've met the requirements of a law or regulation from a government agency or a state agency or somebody that says you have to meet those requirements, and you literally check the box and you demonstrate how you met them. That's not security. It's a good start, but every adversary in the world that wants to get you will look at what your compliance requirements are and go right around them. It's an easy roadmap to say, don't try here. They had to fill that hole. Where else should I look?
I want to get your take on what I would consider to be a sort of a healthy tension. I think I think we could agree that there's a need for a certain amount of regulation. At the same time, it strikes me that it doesn't do anybody good if that relationship between government and industry is more adversarial than collaborative.
So that's the big question. It's always, I think for decades, people have been trying to determine that correct relationship, right? We're all on the same side. We want to maintain our way of life, have safe and sound systems. So I think it actually depends by sector. So for example, the financial sector has always been highly regulated. The IT one, historically, not so much, because the makers of technology have felt that innovation could get stifled in many ways if you have too much regulation. And as a geek myself, I can tell you where there's a lot of truth in that, where if you are told, here's what a company must do for cybersecurity, companies will go and manufacture. If you're told you have to have widget A, B, and C, companies will manufacture all kinds of varieties of A, B, and C because they know they're going to sell. They know they'll make money. The consumers won't invest in anything outside of what they have to have because, candidly, unless they are really forward-thinking and willing to invest, they don't have to.
Yeah. So
you end up with two bad things there, right? One is nobody's making anything new because there's no market for it. No one cares because the government's told you what you have to be secure. But the worst thing is that all the adversaries know exactly. They've now reverse engineered which is A, B, and C, and they have created their attacks right around it. You can always get around something. It's about resilience. It's about understanding not if, but when the storm comes to me, how I'm going to recover. It's really about in my opinion, it's about what's the minimum amount that can be required so that you're in a position to innovate toward resilience. So it's a very tough balance, but you have to preserve the innovation and the free market and have just enough regulation to ensure that balance and that innovation isn't causing harm.
That's Phyllis Schneck from Promontory Financial Group. She's a featured presenter at the 5th Annual Cybersecurity Conference for Executives, hosted by Johns Hopkins University, March 13th in Baltimore. ESET has found another supply chain campaign, apparently originating within China, attempting to backdoor Asian gaming companies. ESET thinks the group is the one Kaspersky described in its 2013 report on the Winit operation. At least one Trojanized game, ironically called Infestation, remains in circulation. Avast and Emsisoft have each released decryptors for Big Bob Ross ransomware. Bravo to both companies. If you've been afflicted by Big Bob Ross, go to the company sites, those would be Avast and Emsisoft, and see what they've placed out there to help you salvage your data. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, took out an ad on Facebook calling for big tech companies like, Facebook, for instance, to be broken up. In particular, because critics say they tend to exercise a monopolistic control over information. Facebook took the ad down, citing misuse of its logo in the senator's ad. But then Facebook put the ad back up because the company said it's in favor of robust debate. We hope the senator's people sent Mr. Zuckerberg's people a nice fruit basket, because that kind of self-confirming publicity you really can't buy. Human curation or algorithm, we don't know, but the to and fro is so good for the senator that if we were peddling a conspiracy theory, we'd tell everyone she and Mr. Zuckerberg arranged the whole kabuki dance just between the two of them, and maybe even at the Bohemian Grove. #MonopolyGate. #wealthy elite kabuki. Alas, such stories really are too good to be true. There's nothing new under the sun, but rather we see time and chance in all. Really, she just bought the ad, and really, they just took it down and put it back. But why aren't the shadow brokers all over this story? Anywho, yesterday was recognized as the 30th anniversary of the World Wide Web, and Sir Tim Berners-Lee called for the Internet's users to help it grow up. He's generally seen as the web's inventor. He proposed it when he was at CERN as a way of capturing information that might otherwise be lost due to personnel turnover. Sir Tim writes in Quartz that he sees three big problems with the Internet today. First, deliberate malicious intent, such as state-sponsored hacking and attacks, criminal behavior, and online harassment. Second, system design that creates perverse incentives where user value is sacrificed, such as ad-based revenue models that commercially reward clickbait and the viral spread of misinformation. And third, unintended negative consequences of benevolent design, such as the outraged and polarized tone and quality of online discourse. The first can be mitigated through laws and codes. The second calls for a redesign of systems to realign incentives. That third one is the tough one. Berners-Lee calls for research to understand existing systems and model possible new ones or tweak those we already have. Specimens of all three issues are on display in today's news. It's time to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Recorded Future. You've probably heard of Recorded Future, the real-time threat intelligence company. Their patented technology continuously analyzes the entire web to give InfoSec analysts unmatched insight into emerging threats. We subscribe to and read their Cyber Daily. They do some of the heavy lifting in collection and analysis that frees you to make the best informed decisions possible for your organization. Sign up for the Cyber Daily email, and every day you'll receive the top results for trending technical indicators that are crossing the web, cyber news, targeted industries, threat actors, exploited vulnerabilities, malware, suspicious IP addresses, and much more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks. Go to recordedfuture.com/cyberwire to subscribe for free threat intelligence updates from Recorded Future. It's timely, it's solid, and the price is right. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Joe Kerrigan. He's from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute, also my co-host over on the Hacking Humans podcast. Joe, great to have you back.
It's good to be back, Dave.
Joe, we recently, at the RSA conference, the folks over at NSA released Ghidra. This is their reverse engineering tool, and you've taken a look at this.
I did. I downloaded it and played with it.
Yeah. What do you think?
I'm impressed, Dave.
Yeah.
This is a good tool from the about an hour and a half to 2 hours I spent playing with it.
Okay.
You will need to install a JDK of some kind in order to get it to run.
Okay.
I just had the runtime environment, so that didn't seem to work. But the JDK, I just downloaded the open source one or the Open Java, whatever it is now, and that seemed to work just fine.
Okay.
So there's no real hurdles. You can just go out and download this thing. And the first thing I did was decompile a program that was on my hard drive that was just to look at it and see if it worked, and it worked pretty well.
Yeah.
The next thing I did was I took a look at some code I had written for an AVR solution.
Okay.
Okay, so AVR is a microcontroller architecture. If you've ever heard of the Arduino board, at its center, it has an AVR processor.
Okay.
It used to be Atmel, now it's Microchip. So I just took one of my own files that had been compiled in AVR and loaded it up in this tool and told it it's an AVR file. And sure enough, it disassembled it and then even put up some C code that looks pretty similar to what I wrote.
What if you didn't know that this code was AVR code? Would it try to figure out what it was?
No, it didn't know what to do with it until I told it was AVR code. I did have to tell it was AVR code, but you'll be knowing that it's AVR code if you're pulling it off an AVR chip.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I mean, what do you make of this, that NSA has put this out there in the wild and open sourced it?
I don't know. That's a good question. Why did they do this? Maybe it's because they're trying to make this kind of a tool more available. There is a tool like this called IDA Pro, but you have to buy not only IDA Pro but the HexRays component to get everything that's available in this Ghidra product.
Yeah,
and those are prohibitively expensive.
I have heard some speculation that this allows folks to sort of come into NSA for a career being pre-trained on one of their primary tools. So rather than having to train them in-house, you just open up that more people will come in knowing how to use the tools that NSA uses.
I think a better theory might be that if more people have access to these tools, we'll find these vulnerabilities faster.
Yeah.
And then we can fix them. Of course, there's always a thing. If they're releasing this, what are they not releasing?
Yeah. Well, but I think it's an interesting contribution to the community.
Yeah.
Certainly there are PR aspects to it of making NSA seem a little less mysterious and closed-doored, that they're sending this out there for people to use, contributing to the community. So I think that's an interesting aspect of it.
I would agree.
And, of course, there's always you cannot help when anything like this comes out. There's the speculation that the true purpose from NSA is to include this with some sort of backdoor where they'll be able to see everything that we're doing. And
it's funny when you say that. As soon as I started this thing up, I got a message that said Java wants to open a connection to the internet, and I said no. But that was probably for the updating software. I don't know that was actually Ghidra doing that.
Yeah, I've seen some. I guess there are a couple of little bugs in there, a couple things that are ways it comes out of the box configure that made people raise their eyebrows. But I don't know. It seems as though
you could you could decompile it with itself and see what it says.
Oh, it's Ghidra's all the way down.
Right.
All right. Well, it's an interesting development and an interesting little bit of software for folks to be able to use. So,
I'd say go out and play with it. If nothing else. I mean, it's free.
Right.
It's totally free.
Yeah. All right. Joe Kerrigan, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Dave.
And that's the CyberWire. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Observit, the leading insider threat management platform. Learn more at observit.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. Our CyberWire editor is John Petrick, social media editor Jennifer Iben, technical editor Chris Russell, executive editor Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.